everybody, this is Nicole from Wildflower Valley Farm. Today I'm just going to do a walkthrough and give you an update on our garden. So last week I took a week's vacation from work, basically so I could stay home and get caught up on my gardening. And I got almost everything planted. Most everything came up, not everything. But today I'm going to walk through and show you what I did and how things are coming along. Here under this wire I planted some corn. The reason I put this wire down is because I do have cats. Some are mine, most are not, but they like to dig in soft dirt. And I was afraid that they would try to dig and use the bathroom in this spot here where I planted the corn. So I put this wire over it. Once the corn gets tall enough, they won't mess with it. They really don't dig in the dirt all that much once the plants get to be mature plants. But that's why this wire is here. And as you can see, this corn is coming along nicely in this row and that one for the most part. I planted some squash at the end of each of these rows and it did not come up. So today, after I watered everything, I just went ahead and planted the squash again. And I'm not really sure why this particular row of corn did not come up very well. Looks like only 3 of those sprouted. This particular variety is a green dent corn. And I planted all of the seeds that I had in this spot here, so I can't exactly replant these. But we'll just see how they come along and see how they do. This afternoon I planted some blue corn in this bare spot here. Last week when I was planting most of the garden, I planted some squash. I actually planted some there and it's coming up nicely. I planted some right here that sprouted and promptly died. So I don't know what happened with that, but I replanted that again today. This particular variety of squash is called an 8-ball zucchini. And the color of the fruit, according to the picture, is a really dark, like a dark green. But the fruit is round. And I've never planted this variety before, but it appears to be probably fist-sized. So hopefully that will do well this year and I can show you all what it looks like. All of the sunflowers that you see growing in the garden are actually volunteers from where I was feeding the chickens in the garden over the winter. And as long as they're not hindering the growth of any of the other plants that I planted on purpose, I'm just going to leave those sunflowers. I see no reason not to leave them. The seeds are obviously edible for us or the animals. And the rest of the plant is edible for the animals. So I'm just going to leave those. In between some of these sunflowers, you can see some little baby okra sprouting. Again, I just planted these a little over a week ago. Today is Thursday, and I planted them on Tuesday of last week. As you can see, I need to pull some weeds, but most of the okra that I planted seems to have sprouted and is doing well. Here I planted some yellow patty pan squash and only one of those sprouted. The one that I planted here didn't even attempt to sprout as best I can tell, so I've planted another one of those today. It's just a week behind that one, so it should catch up nicely if it actually sprouts. The raised bed seems to be coming along well. The turnip greens were a little thirsty until I watered them this evening. They're beginning to bounce back. The Swiss chard is doing well. I don't know why it did not sprout as well as I had hoped this year. I actually planted 2 rows right here and only 3 plants sprouted. But I planted some more of those last week and hopefully those will come up. The carrots in this bed are doing exceptionally well. I need to thin those. these are the radishes that I planted. We don't eat that many radishes. I like to grow them to feed the greens to the animals, and we eat a few radishes, but I'm okay that these are flowering and going to seed. I'll just collect those seeds and plant some more radishes that, again, I can feed to the animals, and we'll eat a few, but not that many. This is some bee balm that I planted last year, I think. I believe I planted it last year, and it wintered over quite nicely. It's getting ready to bloom. There's little buds just like this all over it, so it should be blooming very soon. I like to have lots of flowers in the garden to attract the bees and to help feed the bees. I don't have bees. I hope to get some in the near future, but anything that I can allow to flower and it not affect the productivity of the plant, of the vegetable, then I don't mind to let it flower. These radishes that are flowering will help attract some bees. Of course, this bee balm is there for that same reason. This is something called strawberry spinach. I have never planted this prior to this year. It's a new variety for me, and I had several starts that I put in the ground here. Only these 3 seem to have survived, but they are doing very well, so hopefully they will produce well for me, and we'll see how that turns out. It's supposed to produce some flowers that grow in clusters, that the cluster of flowers looks like a strawberry. And those flowers are supposed to be edible. I don't think they taste like strawberries, but that's why it's called that, is because that cluster of flowers looks like a strawberry. So if it actually makes any, I'll taste them and let you know what they taste like. Here in this little corner next to the chicken pen, I have planted just 3 little loofah gourds. I'm hoping to let those climb up the fence here, and I don't know if this netting is heavy enough to hold the gourds. We'll see. I may just let the leaves, the plant itself, climb over the netting and not let the actual gourds lay on it. We'll just have to see how that turns out, but my idea here is to not only grow the loofah gourds, but to let them create some more shade for the chickens. Here is another volunteer sunflower and a whole patch of weeds that will eventually become food for either the chickens or the rabbits. And my peas that I planted several months ago are finally starting to flower, so hopefully they will produce some peas for us. There's not a lot here in terms of the number of plants, so I don't expect to have a huge harvest of peas, but I'll probably save some for seed, and then we'll just snack on some. I don't remember if I planted sugar snap peas or snow peas. I bought both, and I only got one of them actually planted in the ground, and I don't remember which one, so we'll see what these are, but they're mainly for snacking. This trellis here is a freestanding trellis that I bought several years ago, and I have planted some pole beans here. I planted 2 varieties of beans this year. This is actually planted 3 varieties, but specifically 2 varieties of long beans. I've never planted long beans before. The bean itself is supposed to get anywhere from 12 to 18 inches long. And these, I believe, are the ones, they're called asparagus beans. It's a new variety for me, so we'll see how those turn out, but I thought growing on this trellis might be pretty for the garden and functional. If you can see in amongst the weeds that it's time for me to be pulling, the tomatoes that I planted are coming along well. They have actually, some of them have doubled in size since I planted them last week. I will put a link to the How to Plant Tomatoes video that I put out last week so that you can see my method for planting these. But some of them are growing up fairly large in just 1 week's time. They're doing pretty well. These are some bush beans that I planted, and I don't remember what they are, the variety. I'll have to go back and look. I only planted one variety of bush beans, but I planted a couple of rows here fairly close together, basically to save space. But then I planted one there and one at the end of the raised bed there. I just had a few beans left over and ran out of space in my rows here, so I just planted a couple in random places. I planted seeds for some melons. Oh, there it is. I didn't think they had sprouted, but there's one. So hopefully, my idea, most everything I do in my garden, like a lot of other gardeners, is an experiment every single year. I do things differently every single year. My idea is to let these melons, they run like cantaloupe and watermelons do. My idea is to let it run the length of this trellis here that's actually for the tomatoes. Once the tomatoes get large enough to be depending on the trellis to hold them up, I don't think that this melon running down in between them will bother them. It will actually help to shade them and help retain water for them. Same thing for that squash. So again, it's an experiment. We'll see how it works. It may not be a good idea, but maybe it is. We'll see. These squash plants here and those two right there, as well as that one that is in amongst the tomatoes, are all volunteers. Again, they are here for the same reason that the sunflowers are. The seeds were in some scraps that I fed to the chickens when the chickens were in the garden, and the chickens planted them for me. And as long as the squash and the sunflowers are not hindering the growth of the things that I planted on purpose, I'm just going to leave them here and see how they do. See if it's a good idea to plant squash in amongst the onions. I did not plant the squash. Like I said, I planted the onions, and then the squash actually sprouted later. I didn't know the squash were there at the time that I planted the onions, but we'll see if it was a good idea or not. This trellis is for some cucumbers. And unfortunately, only 2 of those. There's one. And there's the other one. Unfortunately, only 2 of those sprouted, so I'm probably going to plant those again. And since it's only been a little over a week since I planted them, they shouldn't be too far behind for it to matter that I am replanting them in the same space. This is my catnip that has been here for, I know, 3 years. I actually think this is the 4th year that it's been here. It has wintered over every year. Every year it dies back, and I think that it may not make it through the winter, but every year it comes back bigger than it was the year before. And that is some thyme there. I planted a zucchini in the space, this little space here, and they didn't come up, so I'm going to plant some there again. I also planted some here. And these beans are the other long beans that I planted. And I believe that this variety are the Chinese yard long beans, I believe is what the packet said. And again, it's a new variety for me. I've never planted long beans before, but I've always wanted to try them. They're just intriguing to me to have the bean be anywhere from 12 to 18 inches long. We'll see how those turn out. If we like them, I'll save seeds and grow them again next year. This is some red romaine that I planted. It's actually been planted probably 3 weeks, maybe. Definitely 2, but probably 3. And I don't know how well you can see it, but that is some red mustard. If you can see those plants in there. Right about the center of your screen there. Those 2 plants are some red mustard. There's more. I can't really get a good shot of it for you to be able to see it on the video. This is some red vein sorrel. I've never tried sorrel before, but I have heard lots of people just rave about how delicious it is, so I thought I would plant some this year and try it and see how we like it. This bed has some more thyme and a dandelion that I did not plant, but I'm going to let it grow. And those purple flowers you can see on the end there are lavender. I am super excited about the lavender because in years past I have been excellently skilled at killing it rather than growing it. And I planted this lavender last year and it wintered over, and it is blooming and doing pretty well considering my history with it, so I'm excited about that. These 2 little plants here are, again, another variety of vegetable fruit. I'm not really sure what you would call it, but something else that we've never planted before called a cucamelon. They're intriguing to me. They are a type of cucumber from what I understand, but the fruit is the size of a grape. So my plan is to let them climb this peach tree. I don't anticipate the vine being heavy enough to hurt the peach tree. So my plan is to let those climb the tree, use it for a trellis. And this is the most condensed part of my herb garden. I have herbs in different places, but this section here is pretty much all herbs with the exception of the strawberries. This is chocolate mint. This is lemon balm. And as I've been working out here, I have found little places here and there where the lemon balm has planted itself outside of this planter, and I'm totally okay with that. That blue back there is some salvia. That is some sage. And of course this big mound here is rosemary. And again, these are strawberries. And I have a question for those of you that grow strawberries. Do you have problems with ants all over your strawberries? Because these ants are kind of freaking out because I just watered the strawberries and kind of flooded the planter on purpose to soak it very well. And apparently I flooded the ants' home. So the ants live in this planter, and I find that they eat the strawberries before I get to eat the strawberries. So how do you keep strawberries, or how do you keep ants out of your strawberries? I don't know if this is too dense and I need to thin it. That is probably the case. But will thinning it get rid of the ants, or do I need to do something else to get rid of the ants? I'm not going to use pesticides of any sort. And considering the number of ants that are in this planter, I really don't think DE is going to help me a whole lot. Diatomaceous earth, I don't think that it's going to help a whole lot. I do know how to kill ants using grits. That may be a video that I do for you in the future, but I don't know. I may try that. I may try spreading grits in here and see if that will kill the ants. But if ants are a problem in your strawberry bed, how do you deal with that? In between the two planters, I planted, again, some more squash. One of the struggles that I have with squash is the squash vine borers. A lot of times I'll get 1 or 2 fruits off of the squash plant, and that's it before the squash vine dies because of the borers. So I have actually, the reason I have just stuck a squash seed here and there and everywhere is to see if they do better in one location versus another. Maybe if the borers, the squash vine borers, kill the plants that are in the main part of the garden, maybe some of the ones that I have just stuck in odd places like this will manage to survive. I don't know. We'll see. And back over here to the onions so you can see how they are doing a little bit closer. They're coming along very well, it seems. I'm kind of worried about them at first because it seemed to take them a little while to catch on, but they've stayed pretty green and they've started to straighten up and look like healthy plants now. So I think they're going to be fine. So that is going to be all for today's video. I hope that you have enjoyed this walkthrough of my itty bitty garden. This is actually a pan shot of the entire garden. And behind that rabbit cage is the corn that I showed you at the beginning of the video. If you've enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. Use that like button down below. If you haven't already, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel. And leave some comments down below if you have any questions or suggestions or answers to any of my questions, like the ants and the strawberries. We do read all of those comments. We don't always reply to all of them, but we do read all of them. And don't forget to check out the description down below for links to all of our social media accounts. Thanks for watching.